everyone, it's Cass. Welcome back to my channel, What Cass Read. Today I'm going to bring you my November wrap-up. I tried filming this already. I didn't like the way that it turned out, plus the light was giving me a headache. Now, November for me was a very mixed bag when it came to reading. I finished 6 books. 3 of them were new to me authors, and then 3 of them were repeated authors. I had 3 books that were 2-star reads, 1 3.5, 1 4, and 1 5. So it was just kind of like, I started low, middle went high, and then ended on a low note. So I was pretty frustrated by that. So I want to start on the lower end of the books that I finished, so that way we can end on a high note. The first book that I ended up finishing for the month of November was City of Lost Souls by Cassandra Clare. Now, I wish someone had told me that this book was the dud of the series. This is the 5th book in the Mortal Instruments series, and I struggled through this book. Books 4 and 5 are the main culprits of why I was in such a big reading slump, because I was trying to force myself to get through books that I wasn't enjoying when I should have just DNF'd it. I really should have. I've heard that book 6 in the Mortal Instruments series does pick up, and I do own it, but I couldn't tell you when I'm gonna pick that one up. I just was completely, I wish someone had told me this was such a dud. The reasons why I wasn't a fan of this were because of all the different subplots, and we had, what, 3 or 4 new budding romances where I just legitimately skimmed, flipped through pages, and I wasn't feeling it. Like, the action all took place in, what, the last 50 pages of the book, which Cassandra Clare has done to me before, and so I knew to expect that, but my god, this one was bad. The next 2-star read was actually the last book that I finished up for the month of November. I finished it up on Audible. So that book is Artemis, written by Weir, narrated by Rosario Dawson. Now, I picked it up because I was a huge fan of The Martian, and it's narrated by Lady Love, Rosario Dawson. I've been a fan of Rosario Dawson since Josie and the Pussycats. Oh boy, so I am posting a full-blown review of Artemis, so stay tuned for that if you want to see like more of my in-depth thoughts. But Artemis is about a settlement on the moon named Artemis, and our main character, her name is Jazz. She is basically an errand girl, but on the side, she smuggles stuff onto the moon for a little extra cash. And she finds herself, she's involved with this like really high-profile rich businessman who's one of her main clients that she snuggles for. He ends up persuading her that he's gonna give her 1,000,000 slugs, which is their form of currency, for pulling off this form of like corporate sabotage. And so the plot takes off from there. On paper, that sounds really great, but there were so many issues. The main issue I had was the character. If you loved Mark Watney in The Martian, it was pretty much the same exact character, but as a female, and it did not work. There's a lot more issues other than just like the characterization didn't work. Like, as far as the narration by Rosario Dawson, I'll say this. If you're expecting like sultry, sexy, smoky Rosario Dawson voice, don't expect that for Artemis. She does do a lot of different accents. Some of them succeed, a lot of them don't. She's an easy person to listen to, so I will give her that. It still ended up being a 2-star read, and whenever I get my review posted, I'll go ahead and link that for you as well. And then there's this book, The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. This was probably my most infuriating 2-star read that I've read in a long time. I hated this. I hated this book. So this is a story about a young adult woman. She is a travel writer for this travel blog, travel magazine, and she is set on an assignment to go on this like luxury cruise and write and report back to it for her travel magazine. The plot kicks off and gets going when she's sleeping in her cabin, and all of a sudden she wakes up in the middle of the night and she hears a body being thrown overboard, and then she sees blood on the cabin next door. She runs around the ship, she can't find any answers. It doesn't appear as if anybody's missing because it's a very small cruise ship, so the crew is really small, the guest list is super small. There were some things in here that were written purely for shock value. The book starts off with our main character is robbed and she's burgled in her home, and then she sort of like develops this PTSD, which I think kind of the main reason was like later on in the book when she's trying to solve this mystery and she's questioning all these passengers, the PTSD is kind of like used as a backfire against her and sort of to discredit her, because they're like, girl, you're crazy, was just kind of like this like really shocking thing that doesn't really get resolved. And then, okay, so there's a lot of like, you know, industry people and coworkers on this ship, and one of them is an ex, which is vomit inducing anyway, but he sexually assaults her. Like, literally after the assault, he's sitting in her cabin on her bed, and he's like trying to apologize for all that. And I'm like, what the fuck? This guy just like put his hand down your shirt, and not just put his hand down your shirt, but just like literally grabbed, squeezed, you know, you can get the point. Why is this guy in your room? Why is he not like have a bloody nose from you like shoving your door in his face? I just didn't understand that at all. And she sort of like relies on him for the rest of the trip. Like, keep in mind, this is after he's like reached down her shirt and grabbed her. I don't, So the story was kind of like wrapped up with a neat, pretty little bow. It just was so unprobable. I hated every second of it. It was just not good. So this was my final 2-star read of November. Thankfully, things picked up with The School for Good and Evil by Soman Chainini. This I gave 3.5 stars. Now, this is a middle grade novel, and I picked it up just kind of like as a palate cleanser, easy read over the Thanksgiving holiday. And it follows 2 young girls. They live in a fairy tale village, and every 4 years or so, there's a character that comes into their village and steals 2 children and brings one of them to the school for good and one of them to the school for evil. And they kind of spend their days in this enchanted school, enchanted forest, learning how to become princes and princesses and villains. And there's like magic lessons, there's prince lessons, there's beautification and uglification. And our 2 main characters, there's a girl named Sophie. She has been waiting to be taken her whole life. She's wanted to be a princess. And she ends up getting taken to the school for evil. And then her best friend Agatha, who grew up in a graveyard, was taken to the school for good. So it's like a really cute setup, and I can see like 9-10-year-old me like super eating this book up. But it did get a little bit repetitive, because there were parts of the narration that were told like they were told twice, just from 2 different perspectives. Like, the same exact story is happening, but one character's in the school for good and one character's in the school for evil. And so it just got a little bit repetitive. The message was sort of that we can like write our own fairy tales. There was a brief moment of some girl power kind of in the end. Like, girls were wondering why their worth is determined if one of the princes asks them to the ball. I mean, there was just like a lot of pining over princes. It is what it is. It is what it is. I wish we had spent a little bit more time with the magic system, to be honest. I do have the 2nd book in the series. I don't know if I'm going to pick it up anytime soon, but 3.5 stars. It was fine. Up next, I have Age of Swords, written by Michael J. Sullivan. So this was my 4-star read of the month. And this is book number 2 in the Legends of the First Empire series that he has written. And you mostly have seen me just tout his praises for the Rhyuria Revelations and the Rhyuria Chronicles series. This Legends of the First Empire series is sort of the prequel to all of the events that happen in the Rhyuria Revelations. It takes place about 1,000 years before the events in those books. So none of the characters are the same, nothing's really the same. This is sort of like, how did we set up the world that we live in for Royce and Hadrian, for the Rhyuria duo. So as far as like a 2nd book in a series, this one did kind of have some of those like 2nd book pacing problems for me, which hasn't totally happened for me before with Michael J. Sullivan. This book starts off with like all of our characters at the end of the first novel, they end up killing an elf, which hasn't happened for many millennia. They don't think it's ever happened before, and this is the first time that everyone in the world is sort of realizing that elves are killable. So there's sort of, this is the retribution, and we're setting up the retribution for the humans versus elves kind of showdown that they're kind of hinting at. But it took a long time to set up any sort of action. About halfway through the book, we did get this like full female cast of characters go off on their own quest. It was very reminiscent of Fellowship of the Ring at that point, but it was a full female like Mines of Moria sort of plot line. I mean, I gave it 4 stars But I'm just saying, for Michael J. Sullivan fans, there were some criticisms, and so I think some of it was kind of like setting up the plot for the next book. There were a lot of complaints about like every single modern machinery invention, like this is how we got the wheel, this is how we got barrels. And I was reading the fantasy subreddit, and Michael J. Sullivan did ask me anything on this novel, and so some people did kind of give him some flack for that. And he answered right back, and he was like, look, it's just going to set up things for Age of Swords, or I'm sorry, Age of War, which happens in the next book. That one's coming out in 2018. But just a heads up, the one really cool thing though, for those of you who are Wire fans, I will say this, a legend comes to life in this book. Like, that happened. That legitimately happened. There's just some little Easter eggs for Wire fans, so if you are, that's why I wanted to share that. So this was my 4-star read. And then the final book that I want to showcase is Illuminae by Aime Kaufman and J. Kristoff. This was my 5-star read. It was an unexpected 5-star read. I have my full spoilery and spoiler-free reviews down below. Legitimately, this book shocked me. I wasn't expecting anything from this book. I went into it with super low expectations, and then it just completely blew me out of the water. It was such a wild ride. It's a young adult sci-fi novel, but I don't think the title of young adult should scare adult readers away from this. The story in here, it just gets really deep and really dark. It's so wild. This one, 5 out of 5 stars. Okay, so that was my November wrap up. Like I said, it was like pretty up and down for me. I started on a low note, middle was high, and then ended on a low note, which is kind of a bummer. Because of that, I'm legitimately, I just posted my December TBR. I'm legitimately gonna like swap around some books. I was just really furious with Artemis. I was really furious with The Woman in Cabin 10. I just was like, I don't have time for this. Like, I want to read books that I'm gonna enjoy. Like, I'm literally gonna unhaul a bunch of books that are just things that I'm never gonna get to, and I just was like, you know, just be honest with yourself, you're never gonna read these. So I think my December TBR is gonna change up a little bit. I think I might throw in some more fantasy than I had originally intended. That wraps that up. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're one of my new subscribers, I have to say thank you. There are some of you that just joined me over this past week, and I'm a pretty new channel, but I'm really thankful that you decided to come and join me over here. If you haven't already, you can follow me on all of my social media. I'm on Instagram and Twitter. It's at WhatCastRead. It's the same as this channel, all one word, so it's super easy to find. And then you can find me on Goodreads if you're not like super into different social media platforms, but I do have my Goodreads account linked below, so you can find me on there because I'm pretty active on that. Otherwise, thank you again so much. Subscribe, like, comment below. You guys know how these videos end. I'll talk to you later. Bye.